It's sometimes easier to associate Eric Liu with the big institutions and brands he once worked with, speechwriter to President Bill Clinton or executive at Real Networks. But that kind of shorthand is less useful when we consider his true innovation, growing and deploying human networks to promote civic engagement. The Guiding Lights Network, the True Patriot Network, Citizen University. He built that. And these networks are invaluable now, a powerful currency to fund social change, which is why we add Eric Liu to our exclusive list of The Innovators. I'm Hanson Hossein. Welcome to Four Peaks. Eric Liu, welcome. So you've worked in all these corridors of power, Real Networks, at the White House. Why come to Seattle and build your own networks?
Oh, well, I'll never forget the first time I came to Seattle. It was actually with President Clinton. It was 1993. He was here for a conference, the APEC conference, Asia Pacific Economic Conference, and we were staying in the Westin downtown. And I looked out the window of my room at the Westin. It was evening, and it was just the most gorgeous Seattle view you could imagine. And I thought, just on a very deep, visceral level, this place is it. Like, this is it for me. There was this combination of how entrepreneurial the vibe was here, how physically beautiful the place is, how Asian it is relative to where I'd grown up in upstate New York. And I think underlying all of that, that just this feeling that this is a part of the country that's not yet finished. You can still write the future of this place, but you can also write the future of the country from this place. And it took me a little while longer to be able to articulate what I've just said, but I felt it very strong in the gut when I came here then. And so just set that intention of eventually I want to make this my home.
It's interesting because you could have had it so much easier if you'd stayed in D.C., where you had probably a very certain career path, or gone to New York or whatever else, because it is kind of unfinished here. You had your work set out for you, which meant you actually had to start those networks from scratch. Why did you think you were up for the task?
Well, to me, I didn't think about it consciously as I need to start a network from scratch. I thought about it as, look, let me back up. Having worked in Washington, D.C. in national politics, I can say that, the good, the bad, and the ugly of it, right? I mean, it was incredibly exciting, purposeful work. But Washington, D.C. as a place is not a real place. It's this hologram of a place. And if you want to have a community where you feel deeply rooted and feel connected to neighbors and to fellow change makers, it isn't that. It's a transient place where everything is kind of meta, right? And everybody's talking about positioning rather than doing. And so I already had this strong, again, gut feeling after my years in Washington, D.C. that I wanted to be in a place where I could be rooted, where there would be real human networks of friends and neighbors and people who were leaders from all different sectors who actually wanted to make that place thrive as a place.
So how did you get out of the Beltway, like Escape from New York kind of thing, right? Escape from D.C. And actually, to me, your greatest accomplishment was actually to almost build a business model out of creating these squishy networks that actually lead to incredible change. How did you actually think about doing that?
When I first came to Seattle, I spent my first couple of years here at Real Networks. And that was such a fascinating time because it was the last year of the boom and the first year of the bust in 2000. Yeah, exactly. And that work, I mean, apart from being this intensive education in business and technology, also just began to root me in this place, right? I mean, I began to develop friendships and relationships both in the world of business and tech and more broadly in community and civic life. And one thing that my time at Real Networks really underscored for me was, actually for me, networks isn't even the biggest thing. For me, purpose is the biggest thing. Like, I just learned, I loved intellectually the work I was doing at Real, but it did not feed my spiritual sense of purpose, of wanting to do something like what you get to do here that ends up contributing to a greater good, ends up actually lasting beyond just the moment that you're doing the work, right?
So was that purpose obvious to you from the outset?
No, I had no sense of it. All I had a sense of was it wasn't going to be in that place. So I left Real, and I actually set out on a book project, a project that ended up being this book that was published in 2005 called Guiding Lights, about great transformative mentors, teachers, coaches, leaders from all different walks of life.
And you were looking for inspiration, it sounds like,
well,
when
yeah.
you were doing that.
I mean, the very quest of researching and writing that book was partly kind of searching for different languages and vocabularies of purpose and models of people who had built for themselves, sort of in the way you're talking about, from scratch, networks and careers and identities that didn't fit neatly into other people's boxes, but were completely infused with a sense of greater purpose. And after spending all that time researching and writing that book and traveling around the country, I was lit. You know, I came back and I realized I can do this. I can build that kind of life. And it grew very organically. From the work of that book, I created this organization, Guiding Lights Network, which really was meant to share the art of mentorship, drawing lessons from all these different domains and professions, not just business, not just education, but the arts and technology and the military and faith communities, and getting people across these different silos to come together and talk about what they actually had in common, like what the common DNA was between the Hollywood acting coach and the Marine drill instructor and the Procter & Gamble executive. And when you draw that kind of stuff out, you realize kind of by accident, I'm building a network.
But
right?
It takes a lot of courage to do that, because you could have had the safety net of the big company or the big government, but you said, you know what, I'm going to be, frankly, very entrepreneurial in how I do this. Did you feel, I mean, I know that you felt very strong about the strength of your convictions in doing this, but did you feel like this was actually sustainable and viable at the same time, that you could actually support your family doing this?
You know, I think part of the benefit of being younger is you think less about these questions and you are more willing just to leap and assume you will fly. But the other part of it, Hanson, is, you know, just my own family history. My father, well, first of all, my father died rather young. He was 54. I was 22 when he died. And he had a good life, but a lot of his working career was spent at a big institution. He was an IBMer. I grew up in upstate New York, in Poughkeepsie, which was a big IBM town. And IBM was a great company. I have nothing but fondness for the institution and the way it shaped our lives. But I looked at my dad's career, and on the one hand, as an immigrant from China, for whom English was not the first language, he did awesome. He had a great career at IBM. On the other hand, relative to his actual talents and gifts and capacities, that large organizational setting completely underutilized him, and he was completely underactualized in that place, right? And so that left this very strong impression on me of A, life is short, B, be willing to chart your own course and not just live within a box that others have created for you.
Well, I love that. We're going to take a break, but when we come back, I want to talk a bit more about that Go West young men. And I think this also feeds into the things that you've said about machine brain, big institution IBM, and growing your own garden here in Seattle. So we'll be right back with Eric Liu. We're back with Eric Liu from Citizen University, Guiding Lights Network. What else? I mean, all these networks, right?
What's the Seattle Mariners?
Big fan.
That's my dream, is to be a pitcher for the Mariners.
You know what's also interesting? You're also a former Marine, and I didn't know this about you until recently, that you are an inductee of Skull and Bones, that huge secret society from Yale University that George Bush is also a member of. Has that network, that old boys network in many ways, given you any credibility, credence as you were building out these new ones here in Seattle?
I could tell you about it, but I would have to kill you.
I know, I see the gun.
I like this show, so I'm not going to kill you.
Okay.
I want to correct one thing. I went through Marine Corps Officer Candidate School when I was in college, after which, if you complete it, you are eligible to take a commission as a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. And I completed it, but I declined the commission. So there are real Marines out there who would say I was, I went through OCS, and those 12 weeks were incredibly formative.
The haircut remains.
The haircut long precedes that. That's a whole other story of a dare in middle school. Those 12 weeks that I spent at Marine Corps OCS deeply shaped what was already probably latent in me, this sense of wanting to always to be part of something greater than oneself. And again, just believing in ways that oftentimes in our culture seem earnest, passé, just to actually believe in our country, right? And I think that's, although my politics have always been progressive, part of what I think we have to do is conserve and redefine a sense of what it means actually to be a patriot.
So that's what I find very interesting, because you do have, frankly, that conservative street cred, having some relationship with the military, having gone through the Yale Skull and Bones thing. At the same time, you've been, obviously allied with the Democratic Party, worked for Bill Clinton. There's no doubt that you can speak the language of progressivism. How successful have you been in actually truly reaching out to conservatives and getting them to sort of play along with some of the things that you really want to accomplish?
Well, Hanson, let me tell you about a couple of projects that I've got going. So one, you've described, one is called Citizen University, and it is at the heart this annual national conference that we hold here in Seattle. But it's also sort of an umbrella for a whole host of other projects and programs that are all about teaching the art of citizenship, what it means actually to show up and engage in civic life, what it means to claim American identity in something other than just a jingoistic chest-thumping way, but actually what are you doing to contribute to the betterment of the country, right? And one of the things that we've tried hard to do at Citizen University is to make this a cross-partisan conversation. I'm a Democrat, I'm a progressive, but I don't believe that my party or my side has any kind of monopoly on any of these virtues of contribution before consumption and of putting a greater good before private self-interest. And so we've worked with folks like Joan Blades, who's the co-founder of MoveOn.org, the very liberal online network, and a fellow named Mark Meckler, who's the co-founder of the Tea Party Patriots. Right?
And you've had substantive conversations with them?
Oh, we've had substantive conversations with them. We've brought them on stage together to model a thing that Joan has really catalyzed around the country called living room conversations, in which a liberal and a conservative each invite a couple of friends to come together and have civil, grown-up, agreeable ways to disagree. It's not this kind of woo-woo thing where people come out of it expecting to hold hands and have happy consensus. They will disagree on politics, but they will come to actually see each other as human beings, to understand that even though you and I may differ completely on guns or on abortion or immigration or taxes, whatever it is, that there's some element of your story that I can connect to, right? And this is something that I learned, again, back in the work that I was doing around mentorship, because when I traveled all around these different sectors and domains, I developed a couple of universal questions that I could ask no matter who I was talking to, right? And they were questions that were these: who's influenced you and how do you pass it on, right? I don't care if you go to a red state, a blue state, with a super left, a super right person. If you ask those two questions, the kinds of human answers you will get in response about parents, coaches, grandparents, other influences, teachers and mentors, open up a channel that is human, right? And if we're going to take citizenship seriously and take self-government seriously, it's got to be about something more than just, again, positioning and demonization. We've got to see each other as in it together and see each other as humans that can connect. And yeah, we're going to disagree, but we're going to do that in a way that is enlightened.
And it's something you've modeled with something you've done recently with called Citizen Me. And when we come back after the break, I want to talk a bit more about that and show an excerpt of that as well. So we'll be right back with Eric Liu. We're back with Eric Liu. Eric, I just want to follow up on the conversation we were just having before the break. I love the fact that you're bringing together both sides to have these civic and civil conversations. But it's hard not to think that, our social contract isn't broken when you see incredible tragedies like a tornado in Oklahoma or a school shooting in Connecticut. And then the online conversations just degrade immediately into political bashing. So how is what you're doing going to help fix that?
Well, what I'm doing is a response to that, right? I mean, I think you're right that our culture, our civic culture has become more coarse, it's become more atomized. It's partly because of technology. It's more possible, both online and offline, just to flame people and assume that you can just get away with it and have no kind of further interaction with folks. And, to me, one of the reasons why I do the work that I do now, convenings like Citizen University, where we're teaching people from around the country different dimensions of the art of showing up as a citizen, right? How to advocate, how to organize, how to make a case for something, how to frame issues, how to disagree agreeably, right? The reason why I'm doing this is that we have to take affirmative action to renew a culture of citizenship. when you have a republic, when you have a democracy like this, it's not a given that people are born capable of self-government, right? In fact, the default is for people to drift more and more into atomized self-interest, right? And so we have to continually renew as a culture, whether it's through pop culture, whether it's through faith communities, whether it's through all the returning veterans now who want to find new ways to contribute to the life of our country, whether it's our schools. We have to find all these institutional channels to revitalize a spirit of citizenship. And that's the work that I'm trying to do right now. And, you know, yes, it involves bringing left and right together, but actually that sounds a little bit almost anodyne. Like, I want to describe not just what we're for, but what we're against, right? Because what I'm against is a prevailing ethic of rugged individualism. I'm against a prevailing ethic of market fundamentalism that, hey, everybody should be able to do whatever the heck they want as long as they're not actively hurting somebody else, right? We have to change that norm at an ethical, almost a spiritual level. And my projects are going to be one piece of that, but this project itself is going to be another one because it's showing people a different story of what it means to innovate, what it means to participate, and what it means to take ownership of a community. Speaking
of stories and of adding to the culture, you recently embarked on this wonderful project called Citizen Who. I just want to show a little bit from your performance in Arizona, where you actually, it's part theater, part music, part engagement, which I love. This is Eric in Arizona playing the violin, actually. And we'll let this play a little bit while we're talking, but you really sort of tackle what it means to be a citizen now, and you actually have the oath of citizenship given to the audience, but then you take them through a completely different type of oath. That citizenship itself seems to be morphing in your head. Oh, here comes the woman who's going to give the oath, the traditional oath. Is this oath good enough still for citizens of America?
Well, I appreciate you showing that clip. The Citizen Who was a performance piece that I created to explore these topics, right? I mean, a lot of the time I come at these topics of citizenship and American identity in a very straight-on linear way. And one of the things about creating a piece that combines a little performance and a little speaking and a little music and a little theatricality is it lets a lot more people in because you come at it sideways, you come at it in these different channels that aren't usually part of formal political discourse, right? And so Citizen Who is just this 60-minute piece where I'm telling stories, both personal and historical and national stories about the ways in which we ask ourselves, who's a citizen? What does it mean to be a citizen, right? And we both open and close with these oaths, as you're saying. And the opening one is the actual naturalization oath that immigrants take when they become United States citizens, and which most Americans have never heard or thought of because most Americans have never been to a naturalization ceremony. But what we close that performance with is a different thing, Hanson, and it's a project that we created called Sworn Again American. And it was inspired by the fact that if you go to a naturalization ceremony and you see how moving and powerful it is to see people who've made their choice to come here and to claim this country as theirs, you realize, why don't we have something like that for everybody? Why don't we make something like that for Americans of long standing, for people whose families have been citizens for generations, to, in a sense, renew their vows, right?
You know what? I want to get a better sense of what those vows are after the break, because I want to hear what you think the difference is between citizenship and membership. So I'll be right back with Eric Liu.
Four Peaks is made possible by generous support from the Museum of History and Industry and from Weber Shandwick.
We're back with Eric Liu from Sworn Again American. I want to talk about that. What is the difference between citizenship and membership when you're looking at reimagining our obligation as Americans?
Well, membership is just membership is an accident in a way. Birthright citizenship, which is the law of the land under the 14th Amendment, makes you a citizen if you just had the dumb lottery luck to be born here, right? And part of the point of this Sworn Again American project is to make those of us who had that dumb lottery luck to be born here to think about what would it take if we actually had to earn it? What would it mean to actually have to contribute, to have some understanding of the country's history and the country's civic culture in just the way that naturalizing immigrants have to do, right? What would it mean if you weren't guaranteed citizenship at birth? And to me, that actually highlights this difference. Citizenship ought to be something more than simply a matter of documentation status. In fact, I would say in the midst of the immigration debate, there are plenty of Americans today who do not have the documents, but who are bigger, better, greater citizens than plenty of other folks who have the documents. And to me, citizenship is about that ethic of showing up and contributing, understanding the history and the context, and understanding the obligation that you have to make an exceptional promise of being American actually something that's delivered upon. If all you do is sit on the laurels of those words, you're not doing all you can.
Well, that's really interesting, because we started our conversation talking about networks and how powerful they are and they can be. I'm curious if we actually took what you would like to see citizens ultimately become in this country and have them re-up, essentially. It sounds to me like really good citizenship in America, Eric Liu style, is actually a really healthy network at the same time.
It is, and it's, I think that's a super important point, Hanson, because it's not about top-down, the president tells us all what to do and how to be, right? This is about self-organizing communities. The metaphor that we've talked about before of the garden, right? This is about all of us tending the local gardens of our democracy. And if you can decide that my job here is actually to make sure I seed and I weed and I feed the health of my community, of the circle around me, that's citizenship, right? All citizenship, like all politics, begins locally. And if we can cultivate that in a networked way, in a way that is about people coming together as peers, and not being told from somebody high up on some kind of hierarchy that they've got to do differently, that's what I'm trying to catalyze in the country. That's what I think makes Seattle beautiful, because when you look around the country, this is a place that practices that. This is a place that in every neighborhood lives that. And I think the more the rest of America starts looking like Seattle, the healthier our citizenship and our gardens of democracy will be.
Well, I think this is a great place to leave our unfinished conversation. And unfinished conversation is what American citizenship is all about as well.
Great.
So Eric Liu, innovator and master of civic engagement, thanks for joining us. We invite you all to extend your reach by connecting with us at 4peaks.org. I'm Hanson Hossein.
Production of 4 Peaks would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors.